And welcome to In Stereo with Mike and Rick. This is our second episode, and I'm Mike Bovaird.
I'm Rick Miller.
And this is In Stereo with Mike and Rick. Today's special guest is Steve Greene of Nordost. Steve has been with Nordost for approximately 10 years. He is our representative for our region, and we thoroughly enjoy working with Steve on a daily basis and talking to him about all the exciting products from Nordost. They are far more than just a cable company, and Steve is here to talk to you guys and tell you a little bit more about himself and talk about the Nordost products, not just the cables, but everything else that they do. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Steve, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background? So, very fascinating. You've been around in the industry for a long time.
I graduated from college, and I wanted to work in the audio industry. I was living in the Metro Washington, D.C. area, and discovered pretty quickly back then, other than they weren't yet there, but Conrad Johnson, of course, came out of that market, but there were no manufacturers there at the time. So I actually left. I was working for an optometrist part-time after I graduated from school, and went to work for Audio Associates, which was a retail chain up there.
Okay.
And we were at the Washington Hi-Fi show, which used to be a huge show back in the, probably started in the 60s and all through the 70s. And I ran into Bernie Mitchell of Pioneer Electronics in the hallway and struck up a conversation with him. I thought I had met a rock star because he was so well known, and it turned out they were changing the rep firms in that market actually that month. And I got a call about a week later from the new rep firm head, and they interviewed me and offered me a job, and went to work for Pioneer for almost 20 years.
And that was back in what year?
1977 to 96.
77 to 96. So that really was the heyday of Pioneer.
It really was. We had number one market share. We jockeyed back and forth. There were three brands in receivers that were very, very huge sellers, and that was Pioneer, it was Sony, and it was Marantz.
Excellent. And I remember, Steve, I had back in the day, I had a Pioneer quadraphonic preamplifier, and had the large volume control in the middle, and it had four individual pots for balance control for the four quad channels. I don't even remember the model number. Do you remember?
The QC800A.
The QC800A. That definitely brings back memories. And not long after that, I also acquired a large Pioneer receiver. It was like 270 watts a channel or something ridiculous like that. It was a beast. Do you remember what that was?
The SX1980, which I had to drag through a mall to put on display at one point, and the thing weighed over 100 pounds.
How'd you get it through the mall?
I had to slide it in its box all the way down the middle of the mall.
That didn't look out of place.
They did not have a hand truck for me, unfortunately.
Oh, gosh. Wow, that's great. After Pioneer, you left, and where did you end up after that?
Well, Pioneer merged. Pioneer in the U.S., there was U.S. Pioneer, and that was in Moonachie, New Jersey, headed by Bernie Mitchell and Ken Kai. And there was a car division in California headed by Jack Doyle. They merged the companies together, and they moved U.S. Pioneer to California. And then in 1996, they went through they still had separate sales offices for home and car in every metropolitan area or in the regions of the country. And they combined all those together and went through a downsizing. And unfortunately, the guys in the hi-fi division, to a large degree, were the ones that were downsized. So I went to work for Aiwa, AIWA, the mini system and cassette deck and so forth manufacturer, and was there about 6 years. And Sony owned a controlling interest in Aiwa. And after a bad year, not for me, I did really well.
Right.
We had a lot of closeouts one year.
Right.
Anyhow, Sony basically shut Iowa down. So I went to work for Sharp Electronics at the beginning of when LCD TVs were coming out,
Very exciting time.
which was very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was an audio guy, but these were really cool television sets when they came out.
Yes,
so
I remember.
it was exciting. And after 6 years there, they started having some problems and sold their, at the time, the television division to another company. We were slowly, most of us ended up getting downsized. It was at that point I was always a huge audio fan and a high-end audio fan, and I decided to start my own rep firm selling selected.
And that would have been 2010?
It was in 2010.
2010. And so you were repping a number of different firms, including Nordost at the time?
Nordost, Prima Luna, Teal.
Hagel?
Hagel. Yep. Rogers High Fidelity.
Oh, good.
Usher speakers before I did Teal.
Very good.
So really great lines, and got to meet a lot of really cool people over the years, retailers and partners.
Were you doing a lot of shows back then, or not too much in the way of shows? Were you going to the CES and the...
The CES eventually fell out of favor because they relegated high-end audio to, I believe, the Venetian Hotel.
Yes, I remember that.
And it got to the point where it wasn't really economically feasible to go there and display, because we were kind of the stepchild of CES overall when the drones and everything else kind of took over that business.
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
But Expona, I did attend the first Expona show, and I also was going to the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest with the lines that I had.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's really, really cool. And then I believe in 2012, you signed on with Nordost full time.
I did. They decided to go factory direct instead of using independent reps, and offered me the Eastern Regional sales manager's job.
Right. That's excellent. For people that don't know, the audio industry is typically made up of, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 different models for distribution. One, you do have a distributor, so it'd be a company that represents and has a dealer network, here in the United States. So, some examples would be Fidelis, for example. That's a distributor. On a Higher Note is a distributor. There's a number of others as well. The other model is independent reps. So they'll eventually sign on with 3, 4, 5, 6 different companies and represent those companies at shows and handle the dealers and a variety of other things. And then the last model is essentially, as Steve mentioned, factory direct. And, that's something as a dealer we prefer. We just feel that, there's not that extra step involved, not financially, but more in communication. So for a lot of times we have a question like, does this particular DAC handle DSD 256? Well, if you call the rep or the distributor, they're like, I don't know. They don't know, and they have to call the manufacturer, and then we're waiting for them to get back to them and then to get back to us. And it's just, it's a whole big thing. So there are some excellent distributors out there, and we really enjoy working with them, and there's some excellent reps as well. But generally speaking, we're finding that the industry as a whole is going more factory direct to the dealers. And I've always said that the dealers then have to have more of a responsibility to do their research, to do their homework, to find out the information about the product before they go bugging the manufacturer for an answer. But ultimately, they're a great source, obviously, because they build the product. So, Steve, so why don't you tell us about your role at Nordost?
It's going out and putting on new accounts in areas where we don't have distribution, and servicing our dealers like Mike here. Hopefully training the salespeople in the stores, handling problems, taking care of any consumer issues or client issues with any of our products. Just interacting and trying to help them sell the product and keep the customers that they sell it to very happy.
Yeah, I would say that there's, in my understanding, there's 3 individuals like yourself at Nordost that cover the entire. Is it just U.S. or U.S. and Canada?
Actually, there would be a 4th person, because we do have a Bruno handles Canada for us.
Okay, so 4 people to handle North America essentially, and Steve's been great, because you have to understand it's the company is so much more beyond cables today. So there's a lot of technical questions that Steve's been great for us to answer. So what I had asked Steve to do today is bring in some of the products, obviously the cables, and we'll want to talk about those. But for a lot of people out there, you maybe just associate Nordost with just cables and don't know that there are a lot of other products they make. One of the most exciting products I've been talking about is the new Nordost QNet switch, which we got into the store the minute it came out, and then not long after I was purchasing that for myself at home. I purchased one for myself because I heard everything it did and I was blown away. So Steve, did you want to start with the cables? Did you want to talk about some individual products first?
Yeah, I'll tell you real briefly the hierarchy in our lineup when it comes to cables. That obviously has been what we are best known for, but we'll talk about the other products that have been very exciting for us to get into. Our cable family starts with the Life series. That's LEIF, and it consists of White Lightning, and there are speaker cables, interconnects. I'll show you an example. The next model, well, there's White Lightning. Okay, then there's Purple Flare, which happens to be purple. This is the speaker cable. We also make a Purple Flare power cord. And it's a two conductor. It's what we call, it has the figure 8 connector on it right here. And it would plug into like an Apple TV, DVD players, SACD or CD players, anything that doesn't use what we call the IEC, which would be, represented by this cable right here. If you can see, it's a different connector than it is on the two conductor. This is actually 3 conductors. You can see that there are 3 connections right here that plug into the AC. This one does too, the 2 conductor, but we're using it because it's a high grade, hospital grade plug, but it's just actually using connecting these 2 right here.
So Steve, with the let me just have a look at the power cable here. So this, for everybody who may or may not know, this is what they call, and this is standard throughout all cable manufacturers. This is called a 15 amp IEC. So this is essentially the female end. This is called a 15 amp IEC. You may have seen one that is more, rectangular shaped, and that would be a 20 amp IEC. Now the actual technical names, I believe, are C13 and C19, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but most components are going to use a 15 amp IEC or C13. Only you'll see big power amps using typically a 20 amp IEC or the C19 connection. So something you want to be aware of if you're shopping for a new power cable is you want to make sure you know what the other end is. You want to make sure if it's going to be a 15 amp or a 20 amp IEC, as it does matter. Now that may be confusing because some people think, well, does that mean I have to have a 20 amp circuit? No. So this end is 15, and 99.999% of the time it's going to be a 15 amp connection on the other end. So if it was actually a 20 amp connection on the other end, this would be turned. This part here would be actually turned. And you'd have to have a special wall socket for that. So that would be a 20 amp. But most of the time, 99% of the time, this is going to be a 15 amp connection. And you're going to see this is a C13 or a 15 amp. But do be careful with amplifiers. There's a bunch out there that uses a 20 amp connection. So as to why they would use that 20 amp connection, I'm going to ask Rick. Do you know why some manufacturers would use a 20 amp IEC on the other end?
Well, I think there's more surface area in the plug,
Okay.
to give you less resistance in there, because there's just more metal, that mates together in there.
So it has nothing to do with the amount of current or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get greater current through more material.
Okay.
If you had a thin piece of wire, it would eventually just melt like a fuse.
Got it.
In a worst case scenario. But with the 20 amp connectors, there's more metal in there. Probably the spring tension's a little bit tighter, so it can carry greater current.
Excellent. Okay, good. Thank you, Rick.
We also believe that the power cords in our hierarchy of cables, whether it's interconnects, power cords, speaker cables. When you put a cable into a system, the one that makes the biggest initial improvement in sound, we have found, is the power cord. So if you're only going to buy one aftermarket power cord to test the waters, we always recommend doing the power cord. And we always tell you that it should be going from your distribution bar or your power strip directly to the wall. Then the next most important one is your preamplifier to this, and then your sources, and then to your power amplifiers.
So in the order of priority, if somebody was going to be looking at replacing their stock power cords with aftermarket, you're saying the first one would go from the wall to the power conditioner, and then, you know, save their pennies and do the next one from the preamp to the power conditioner, and then the source would be third.
Yep.
That's very interesting.
Yep. And again, you want to do the one that goes to the wall first, because that feeds everything in the entire system.
Everything's going to benefit from that.
Everything is. And then the next one, the preamp, where you might have multiple sources, so they're all going to benefit from then adding that power cord. And then if you have a primary source, that's the next cable you want to buy, is for the primary source.
Excellent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing I wanted to ask you before we get into some of the other products is I wanted to ask you the underlying philosophy of Nordost. The company has been around, the history of the company, maybe you can tell us a bit about it, and then their underlying philosophy for their products, the cables, and their non-cable products.
Yeah, the company started in 1991, and one of the very first products that we came out with was a super flatline cable. And it was, you know, very thin. And a lot of dealers that we initially took it to said, oh, you can hide it under the carpet. That's, you know, that's really cool. You can seal it easily. The real reason we did that is because in a flat cable, and this is the purple flare, and it has multiple conductors that are spaced across in this flat array. It's like a ribbon type cable. By doing that, you can lower inductance and capacitance at the same time. If you take a round cable and you lower inductance in the design, the capacitance goes up. You get a seesaw effect. So using this particular format allows us to do both, and also to lower the resistance. And you can reduce skin effect because the conductors are separated from each other as opposed to being wound around each other. If we go to the Tier 2, and I mentioned that we have the Life series of cables, which again is White Lightning, Purple Flare, Blue Heaven, and Red Dawn. We then go to the Norse 2 series, which is Heimdall, Frey, and Tier. And this is an example of the Tier speaker cable. And you may not be able to see in here, but there's this pattern that you seem to maybe be able to sense here.
I'll make sure to put close-ups too for you.
Okay, excellent. But I can give you a good illustration of that. We use a technology that we refer to as micro monofilament. This is a jumper. This is something that goes between the woofer and tweeter terminals in a speaker to remove the nice looking but bad sounding block that links the two connectors together. And in this, you can see almost a barber pole effect. What we do is the insulation material we use on our cables is FEP, fluorinated ethylene propylene, which has superior dielectric characteristics or insulation characteristics. It sounds better, or it adds less to any coloration to the cable itself. The conductor is a solid core copper conductor, OFC, oxygen-free copper. And then we extrude silver over it. And the reason we extrude the silver over it is there's two purposes, really. One is because copper under a microscope is very porous looking. So it's got all these little nits and picks, and as the sound is traveling along, it's going through these undulations, and it's causing skin effect. I mean, it creates issues. And you, even no matter how well you polish it, you're still going to have that issue. So we extrude silver over it, which we can polish to a very high degree, so it's very smooth. So you're reducing skin effect. It's getting less resistance going along that cable because it's a smooth surface. And it also, if copper tarnishes, and you've probably seen some of the old cables that were very popular many years ago, and the copper starts to turn green, and that's because it's oxidizing. When copper oxidizes, the capacitance goes up, and the cable changes its sound, and that's not good. So the silver, even though if it is exposed to oxygen, can tarnish, but it doesn't have electrical problems when that happens. It doesn't increase the capacitance. So we do for that. But this little barber pole effect is because we take a thread made out of the same material as the outer jacket, the FEP, and we wrap it around this. And then when we put the overall jacket over it, this jacket never touches the conductor. It only touches the spiral thread of the FEP. So it creates an air dielectric. So there's very minor contact between the outer jacket or the insulation and the actual conductor. Any conductor, there's always going to be some bleed through into the outer jacket. So if you can minimize that contact, you're going to get a better cable. It's going to be very wide bandwidth. It's going to be a very fast cable. It's going to be low inductance, low capacitance. It's going to make it easier for the amplifier to deliver the signal into your loudspeakers. All cables are, to a degree, a filter. We try to minimize that in our product design, is make that cable as little a filter as is theoretically possible.
Yeah, no doubt. With Nordost Cables, you hear a tremendous amount of information. You've got incredible transparency. I've told this story before about taking home the Nordost Odin 2 interconnects between my source and my preamp, and hearing the singer Eric Clapton breathing and swallowing, that kind of level of transparency is unbelievable. What that cable that I brought home can actually do. When we talk about Nordost, the underlying philosophy is low capacitance, low inductance. What else? There's some other things that Nordost is known for.
Yeah, we're very big in resonance control.
Okay.
Our loudspeaker cables, from 4 meters in shorter lengths, they're cut to a tune length. And the reason being is that you have resonances traveling up and down the cable. You don't want to work against resonances. You want to work with it. And that's what we do. There are certain lengths. We get to like a 3-meter cable. And through listening tests and a number of calculations, we can determine by adding a little bit more length to it, it actually improves the sound. It optimizes that. So we're very big believers in resonance control. And again, working with it. An example of that is some of the other accessory products we manufacture. One of them is the sort cone. And the sort cone, it's a plastic body here, but this particular one is the aluminum ceramic, the sort cone AC. And you have this aluminum body up underneath here. There's a ceramic ball bearing in here. And then there is this metal piece that then interacts between the two. These act like mechanical diodes. You put them not that way, but this way up underneath your gear. And what it does is it acts like a mechanical diode. It drains. The very worst vibrations are not the vibrations in the room. It's the vibrations that are already inside the gear, from power transformers, from large power supply capacitors, and so forth. So putting these under the gear, it drains those vibrations out of the gear.
So we're talking dissipation, not isolation, as
Exactly.
being the key.
Yeah.
So if you've got a device, it could be your CD player, it could be your phono stage, your amp, it doesn't matter, your DAC, whatever it is. That transformer inside is essentially creating energy at 50 to 60 cycles. Is that correct? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you want to drain that out. You don't want to isolate. So there's a lot of people think it's about isolation.
Yep.
The worst thing you can do is entrap that energy inside the component, because I've actually tried a product that shall remain nameless, that when I did that, within a few weeks, my entire system sounded like dead. It was just lifeless. There was nothing. As soon as I took them out, instantly the life came back. Now with a product like the sort cones, you are dissipating that energy, so it doesn't even have a chance to build up at all.
Yeah, we're drawing it out of the unit. And because of the design of this, vibrations from, let's say, the shelf that the gear is on is not going to go back up into the gear. It's a one-way effect. It's what we call, again, a mechanical diode effect. And I also won't mention the product, but there was something very popular probably about 20 years ago.
Right.
And I bought a ton of them, and I put it under all my gear because it basically isolated the gear from that. it didn't address the vibrations on the inside.
Correct.
And we found that was actually a bad idea. I have a whole box of them now in the closet.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I will tell you, we get asked a lot of times about the sort cones, and one thing you want to make sure you do is that you put it under the chassis. A lot of people, I find, they put it under the foot of the device, but no, you put it under the chassis, and that's the way it will work absolutely the best. So excellent. No, that's very, very interesting.
And you can, in a lot of instances, you can use 3. You don't necessarily have to have 4. On a preamplifier that you're going to be pushing buttons and turning knobs, you probably want 4, but you get a better balance just physically with 3.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any rocking or anything, but again, there are some components where you're going to be physically pushing on them.
Now you're talking about the ball in there. I've heard there's different compositions. And
Actually, they're all ceramic. The ball bearing that's in here, it's this material.
Oh, it's that.
And so we have aluminum, we have bronze, and we have titanium.
Different types of material. Can you talk a little bit about what the sound effect is?
Yeah, I mean, they all have different resonance characteristics. I mean, like for a really, really heavy amplifier, you're probably going to want to use the bronze. But titanium has the very best resonance characteristics. But they're also, because it's titanium, they're more expensive. So the aluminum, where we start with entry level, the aluminum ceramic is an outstanding device. And you're going to hear the sound stage is going to open up. It's going to be wider. It's going to be deeper. It's going to allow instruments to kind of pop out of their own space. And it's really easy to demonstrate when you try these. You just simply play a piece of music for a minute with these under it, and then take it away, and suddenly the soundstage is going to collapse and so forth. So they're highly effective. But exactly the characteristics, it varies, from gear to gear. But
so one might be a little softer, more mellow, and the other one a little bit more detail.
I'm not sure it's that so much as it just has a greater and greater effect. It's the speakers tend to disappear, the walls tend to disappear. It sounds like you're more of the acoustic venue that the recording was made in.
So the customer can tune his system. He can try different ones.
You can, and we have a lot of customers that will actually combine in a piece of gear, maybe titanium, 2 titaniums, and maybe 2 bronze.
So they like one type of material under one type product.
No, he's saying under the same.
Oh, under the same
piece of
2
gear.
bronze and 2 titanium.
All right, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be like, well, the CD player needs this, the power amp needs this, that kind of thing.
These will hold, I hope I have this right. I don't have my cheater notes in front of me, but I believe these each hold up to 80 pounds. So
that's a lot.
So you're combining 4 of them.
Yeah, so you're at 320 pounds. So yeah, that's usually not going to be an issue. The bronze, I'd have to look for the rating on that, but I'm guessing that they could potentially hold a little bit more because it's a much denser material.
Right.
Well, that's great. There's different signatures for each one of those materials that you can use to fine tune.
Steve, sorry, go ahead.
We also find that when customers buy these, maybe they buy for their CD player. Because you've got a disc spinning at 1800 RPM. There's a lot of vibration in there, and this helps drain that vibration out.
And you're optically reading that disc, so it's very critical.
It's extremely critical. Yeah. So we find that they might start with that first, but usually they love the effect so much they buy another set. And
that was going to be preamp. That was going to be my question. Like the power cores we were talking about, going from the wall to the power, the distribution box, and then going to the preamp. But I personally found the source. I started with the source with my sort cones, and then went to the preamp, and then worked my way down from there. So I had my my CD player DAC under one. I had to start with that, and then I did the preamp, and then I did the render, and I started working away from that. And that's what I found to be the most impact.
And I concur. That's generally what we find is start with your source and then move from there.
Yeah. How about tube equipment? Would it benefit dramatically from these?
Highly effective, because tubes themselves, output tubes, they vibrate. Tube amplifiers usually have really big power supply capacitors. They vibrate. The transformers, the output transformer, maybe not so much the output transformers, but the power transformer absolutely vibrate. And these will help drain a lot of those vibrations
and the
out.
tube themselves,
they do.
I worked at valve amplification for a while, and you could take your fingernail and tap on the glass envelope of the tubes, and you could hear which ones were more microphonic than other ones.
Absolutely.
So,
And you sometimes you can hear it.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
almost
that's what I mean.
a shimmer physically, or
It would come out of the speakers. You could do that.
Oh, yeah,
You could
yeah.
hear it come out of the
It's like a
speakers.
ring. It's like, when you were a kid and you put the baseball card in your wheel
Yeah.
and the spoke of your wheel, the bing, 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 bing. You
Yeah.
hear that ring especially if you mute really quickly, you'd hear this ring,
Yeah.
that resonance.
how
Yeah.
many Hall of Fame baseball cards did we potentially
destroy
destroy
it.
without
Yeah.
knowing
I don't
it
even
back
want
then?
to think about it. For me, it would be hockey cards, but for you guys, it would be baseball cards.
Yep.
So tube equipment, CD players, turntables, I think would be
That's a good one,
the
Rick.
most sensitive to vibration.
Yep.
Those
And the
three
preamp,
things.
because again, it's all the signals are going into the preamp.
Yes. Yeah.
So it does. They're hugely beneficial, and we do very well with these.
That's good. That's a big, definitely a big. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about with the jumpers, and Rick, you might be able to, give some insight in this. But what I'm wondering is, we have customers that, let's say, they assume they have two output sets of terminals on the back of their amplifiers, right? Like a pass amp does, and many other amplifiers. Some only have a pair, but let's say they have two pairs, right, on the back of their amplifier. And their speakers can be bi-wired. Are they better to go with a jumper like this, or run, if they have a short run, are they better off to go with another set of speaker cables?
It's going to vary, but here's what we found. This is the tier 2 speaker cable that we showed you a few minutes ago, and there was a tier, and then it became tier 2. There was a Heimdall, became Heimdall 2 when we came out with the newest series of this particular cable. And we found in the listening tests as we developed the product that we used to make it so that you could do bi-wiring and you could do bi-amping, where we would split the conductors up so you had 4 connections coming out to each speaker cable. We found that when you did that, there's a teeny bit of phase shift that's introduced when they're recombining at the back of the speaker. And in addition to the phase shift that's occurring, we also found that you're having the number of conductors to the woofer terminals and to the tweeter terminals. So in the listening test, we started using the jumpers instead, and just what we call shotgunning the cable. So, a positive and a negative to the speaker, and then using these to link between the woofer and tweeter terminals on the speaker. It sounded better using the jumpers.
Interesting.
So we designed these, the Norse 2 series, and also the Life series when we came out with it, that they are not bi-wireable. Now, if you want to buy amp, it means buying, of course, 2 sets of speaker cables.
Right.
And there are benefits to doing that, obviously.
Right.
Because you're then doubling, instead of having, you're doubling the number of conductors. And in our cables, when you go from a purple flare to a blue heaven or a red dawn, what happens is the cable becomes a little bit wider because we're adding more conductors. So it's become a heavier gauge.
So if you had somebody, with this particular cable, and you're saying if you added another run, it would sound better than the jumpers, maybe.
Yeah, and it's going to vary from basically speaker to speaker. And we're finding a lot of speaker manufacturers, there's a lot of effort put into designing a crossover network. And a lot of manufacturers or speaker manufacturers are getting to the point where they're saying, I don't want anybody messing with the crossover network. I'm only going to offer a positive and a negative on the back of the speaker.
Yeah.
So you are seeing a lot of speakers today that don't have 4 terminals, they only have 2.
Absolutely true. Yeah, we are seeing that. You're right.
I mean, when Teal was in business, Jim Teal was huge on that.
Just 2.
He had a very elaborate crossover network, and there were only 2 terminals.
Yeah, Magico is a very elaborate crossover network. It's always just 2 terminals. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Very, very cool. Let's see, Steve, what else? We had touched on the power distribution box, the QB8 here. And this is it's not a power conditioner as it is a power distributor.
It is. It's a really unique device. And when I first went to work for Nordost, I had an issue with an SACD player. I had 2 of the same models in 2 of my systems. They both buzzed horribly when they were connected. There was a ground loop issue, and I had to float the ground on it, which is a really inelegant way of solving that issue. And there's still going to be noise in the background. So the folks at Nordost said, oh my goodness, you have to have a QB8. We're going to send you one. And one Friday evening it arrived. And the design of this product is that the QB8, the 8 stands for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. AC outlets. One of them is labeled primary earth. All of the outlets except this one have a 1/2 foam resistor on them. This one doesn't. This is where you plug your preamplifier or where you plug your processor. Or if you have an integrated amp or receiver, it plugs in here. Okay. Whatever unit takes all of the sources that are plugged into it with interconnects. Okay. The others all have that minuscule resistor on them, but what it does is it slightly raises the ground impedance to all of the other components except for the primary earth one. So all of these components, the sources, whatever, all seek out this component to be the ground of the entire system. So it eliminates ground loops, but it dramatically lowers the noise floor.
Yeah, we can attest to that.
And in my system, when I did that, number one, I was very happy that I no longer had to use this cheater plug on it. But listening to the system that night, I remember having read the brochure, obviously, and went, wow, the blacks are black, or all the audiophile terms. The noise floor dropped dramatically.
The music just appears in the dark.
And that's all that's in here. I mean, there's obviously, this is connected to solid core Nordost wiring to follow the philosophy of when the power cord that connects to it comes out of here. But it's not a surge protector, and it's not really a power conditioner.
There's no filtering in it.
No. It establishes a very firm foundation for the entire system. And on the end of here is a grounding post. And what you can do there is we have a product called Q-Core. I don't have one here today. The Q-Core is a grounding unit, and you plug this into that, and then you can also plug the various Q-Core wires into components, an unused input or output, and it creates an artificial ground. And it's what that does is it lowers the floor dramatically.
Even more.
It takes all the floating, eddy currents and magnetically induced fields and so forth that create noise, and it drains them into this box, and it doesn't come back out.
Yeah.
It improves bass response. It improves detail. They're highly effective. I have 2 in my system.
I have 2 in my system, in fact. Absolutely true. And for connectivity purposes, you're going to connect there is a connection on the grounding system to go to this.
Yeah, there's 3 units. There's a Q-Core 1. It's made specifically to ground a QB8, or if you have another brand of a power strip, if it has a dedicated ground lug on it, then you can connect it to that.
Right.
So the Q-Core 1 only does that. The Q-Core 3 is made just for components. So if you don't have a power strip that has a dedicated ground, then you can just ground components. And it has 3 binding posts, WBT binding posts on the back of it, and it has a banana plug at that end that plugs into the Q-Core. And then we make RCAs or XLR or BNC or Ethernet, RJ45, any number of connectors to plug into the associated gear that you're using. It's only really grounding the outer shell, like on an RCA. But it helps drain, again, any of those issues, grounding issues internally. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd like to be able to run a ground wire outside the window or through the wall to a ground post 8 feet down into the ground. There are some issues there with code in municipalities. You're supposed to always eventually tie into the electrical ground of the house by running posts around the perimeter, and then hardcore wiring all the way through underground. I mean, it's very complicated. If you're a ham or amateur radio enthusiast, you probably know how to do that. And we have people that do both. You can do both. This is a 5-way binding post. You can do a ground wire with a spade and one with the banana to go to the Q-Core, and get the best of both worlds by doing both. But again, it depends on municipalities, and you gotta really know what you're doing. That's why the Q-Core is such an outstanding product, because you can use that by itself, and it's going to achieve a lot of the exact same effects.
So if somebody is looking at setting up this grounding system at home, what they want to do is essentially look at all their components and find unused inputs or outputs. It doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter if it's analog or digital. So if you have
digital benefits the most because they generate so much noise.
It absolutely does. I mean, in my case, I had an unused BNC connection, and so I ordered the BNC end and then the banana end to go into the Q core. And it can be analog, it can be digital, it can be any connection that you're not using. Typically, if you're running a full balance system, for example, and you have an RCA output or input that you're not using on the back of your preamp, there's a great one. You order it with RCA on one end, banana on the other, and off to the races you go. And there's, if I recall from my own system, there's actually dedicated grounding lugs for the amplifiers as well.
Yeah, and they have to be that. A lot of times a consumer will call us and say, okay, my amplifier, like I have a pair of old vintage that I rebuilt, MC60 tube amps, Macintosh. They only have RCA inputs. They don't have any other inputs. They don't have XLR or anything else. I can't connect the Q core to that.
Right.
Because some people will say, oh, just take a screw on the bottom of the case or by the feet or, well, I've done that feet. But anyways, one of the chassis screws connected to that. You don't want to do that because then you're on the primary side of the power supply. So you don't want to do that. You want to be on the secondary side, which is basically circuitry level.
Signal ground.
You're doing the signal ground.
Yeah.
Because this being grounded in the Q core one is totally different.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to intermix the two. And it's okay if some components you can't do it. You want to connect, if you can, as many as possible of your components. It doesn't have to be all of them. In a perfect world, yeah.
But the digital devices really do benefit. Absolutely.
And they usually have enough inputs and outputs that there's going to be something empty on it.
Yeah.
And you're making like a star ground point. All these components, these new ground wires are going to that one place.
Yeah, they're going to that one. It's low voltage attractor plates. In the unit, in passive circuitry, that it all drains it into. And this one, or the Q base, like the Q Core 1, I mentioned a Q Core 1 and a 3. There's also a Q Core 6. It has one dedicated tap just for the Q base, or a similar product, and then it has 5 more binding posts for component level. So you can combine the best of both worlds and use the one box.
So hopefully it all goes into there and not much comes out.
Yeah, it's a one-way effect. It does the way it's designed. The bad stuff goes in, it doesn't come back out again.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And it's very demonstrable. Every time we do a demo somewhere, even the retailer says, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Like
us.
Yeah. Some people will say it sounds a little bit louder, and it's not. You can take an SPO meter, and it's not louder, but it sounds like it might be. The bass is better. It's more tuneful, and the sound staging or the imaging is improved. Image tends to move a little bit. My experience, it tends to move a little bit further out into the room when you're using it.
Absolutely agreed. Back to the distribution box, the QB8. Now, if somebody has a relatively simple system, there is a QB4 as well.
There is, yeah, the exact same unit, but with 4 outlets. It still has that same one tap that says primary earth for your preamp or processor, whatever holds all your sources plug into.
Right. Or you can be like me and need 2 QB8s.
Yeah.
Just to power up all your turntables, reel-to-reels, digital devices, and everything else. Yes, so
tuners.
much stuff. Oh gosh, yeah, so much stuff. Absolutely true. What do you want to tell, now that we're talking about the resonance, do you want to talk a little bit about the QK1?
We came out with, this is the first unit we came out with.
The QV2.
Very, very popular unit. And this simply, it plugs into, you want it to be on the same circuit breaker as the gear. So you can either plug it into, for example, our Cubase, that all your gear's plugged into. But let's say that you're already using all 8 taps. So you can plug this into a wall outlet, as long as it's in the same room on the same circuit breaker.
So if you have a two plugs, 2 gang plug, whatever, and you've plugged this into one, you can plug this into the above it.
You can. The effect is cumulative. You can buy multiples of these, and it improves it a little bit more each time you add another one.
Okay.
The QB2 is an active circuit, and I don't want to get too technical because I'll probably get it wrong. So I don't want to do that. I know that some of my cohorts at Nordost will probably see this, so I don't want to.
Okay. Get it wrong.
I don't want to get it wrong, so hopefully I won't. basically, the circuitry in this affects it's an additive effect to the AC waveform. So you have, a sine wave, you have a peak, and then you have the trough at the bottom. This adds harmonics of the line frequency. I believe it's 60 times per second, just again at the apex and in the bottom of the trough there. It smooths the waveform, so it removes this distortion off of the AC waveform. So it acts kind of like a power conditioner.
Interesting.
And it improves the mid frequencies in the bass in particular. And then we make a second device which looks just like it, and it's called the QK1, and it has a tune coil of our micro monofilament wiring, sort of, this type of wire right here, not this exact same thing, but similar. And it acts as, a resonating coil, and it improves the high frequencies, and it tends to help with sibilance in the female voice. You hear more detail. Is it John Waters? There's one song he does, I think it's the first cut on, I forget the name of the album, and there's a cymbal that's hit in the right speaker, and it basically has a shimmer effect. And when this is in the system, you get the impression it's almost like a flower blossoming out of the speaker. And that's what I heard the very first time, because when they demonstrated this to me at corporate headquarters in our sound room, that's what I said. I said, sounds like it's blossoming out of the speakers. It was incredibly lifelike sounding. These are not real expensive. They're really easy for a consumer to buy, take home,
and try,
or borrow it and try it. I guarantee you, if you take it home and put it in your system and try it, you're going to call up and say, okay, run my credit card through.
I think that's the reason why I need 2 QB8s, is I think I have 4 of each of these in my QB8s. And definitely the effect is fantastic. I mean, you take them out, put them back in, and you're definitely going to hear it.
It takes like a minute or so for the effect to die away.
Yeah.
Initially. We try to do our demos at the shows really quickly, so that your oral memory is not all that great for an extended period of time. So we try to do it quickly. It takes a little bit longer on these, but in the home environment, these really make a big difference. And I don't know that we've ever gotten one back. I don't think anybody's ever said, "Oh, I didn't hear anything."
Yeah.
Actually, there was one guy at one show. There was at one of the Exponent shows, and everybody in the room that was sitting behind him kind of started shaking their heads.
Right. There's always the one guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's
don't
great
be that one guy.
No, don't be the one guy.
It's great that they do 2 different things. They're not just
they're
yes,
exactly. They're complementary to each other. Yeah. And we say, if a customer says, "Well, I can only afford to buy one right now today," we say buy the QV2 first, and then buy the QK1. And then you can experiment with adding more. It also, because of the way that's removing distortion off of the AC waveform, improves video quality on a flat screen TV.
So just to summarize, the QV2, people are going to hear an improvement in
mid-range, bass, and actually, if you go on our website, they add a few more details on there, and some that may expand upon what I'm saying. But the QK1, for me, in my experience, the QK1 tends to affect the higher frequencies.
Excellent.
The cymbal being hit, the sibilance in a female voice. In the QV2, the sound staging, making something that's live sound even more live, and so forth.
That was my finding,
good,
exactly.
If somebody said, "Well, my system's a little soft sounding, I need a little more sparkle in it," then you could recommend the.
I don't. It won't really affect like frequency response or whatever. It just brings more details out, which may be obscure.
But of the high frequencies.
So it could, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It could provide a better detail, a more resolving detail.
Yeah, cymbals, the decay on the piano. Those are the things that I noticed.
Decay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially in the QV2, the decay too, as you get into lower frequencies.
Exactly. So, Steve, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is there's a new product sort of category for you guys, and we're kind of excited about it because we're name dealers, and Nordost has come out with specific cables for name. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a pretty exciting product, and it's something that a lot of dealers have asked us to do. And it's my understanding that name was instrumental in working with us and helping us on this to achieve the best results. But we've come out with a number of cables. I'm going to flip through them real quickly, but 5-pin DIN to 5-pin DIN 240 cable. You're more familiar with this than I am. A 4-pin DIN to a 4-pin DIN. We're doing Burndy cables,
which are power. Yeah.
A 10-pin to a 7-pin cable set, a 17-pin cable, 15-pin cable, a 9 to 9-pin, a whole suite of name cables. Name customers love that brand and the sound and are very loyal to that brand. And this is and keep that product for a very long time. And this is a way to make it even better sounding because it's all the hallmarks of the Nordost product by using the FEP and the solid core copper and silver extrusion.
Well, it's great. I mean, it's great to have an option or an alternative to the name cables that are out there. Name is very focused on building their amps and their preamps and their streamers and whatnot. But this is great to have a company like Nordost that's actually focused on the name cables. And if you live in the goofy name environment, then you will definitely appreciate what Steve is talking about with all the different DIN cables and Burndy cables and various other things. And name is a whole different. It's a whole different animal. It's not RCAs and XLRs like most people are customary to know. It's very, very different, and where devices get their power from are very different. So the Burndy cables are very important. So yeah, this is great to see. This is really, really good to see. Yeah, and they start at the Life series.
It starts with Red Dawn.
Okay.
And then we also, when we go to Red Dawn, from Red Dawn, we do Tier. We're doing Fray, and it's a whole suite of products, and it does make a nice improvement of what's already wonderful sounding gear.
That's excellent. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Very interesting.
Let's talk about my exciting product that I've been talking about a lot is the new QNet. This is a brand new product from Nordost. It's only been out a few months, 6 months maybe.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Did we ship it in? Did we?
November?
I don't think I had it. I think it was after the first of the year.
It was. I think
January,
it was
February.
Yeah, January, February. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more in detail about the QNet. So this is not a router. There's people out there that always get confused about what is a router and what is a switch. So a router is something that is a device to take the internet signal from the outside and assign IP addresses for the devices on the internal network. A router is a lot more sophisticated in its networking capability. This is essentially like, if you remember back in the old days, the cable TV, you would have a splitter. Okay, so if you wanted to run 3 TVs off of one signal, you'd use a splitter. This is essentially what it does for Ethernet, for network connections. Is like a splitter, except it manages the packets of data internally so that there's no lag or problems in between. So, but that switch creates a lot of noise. Now, I've always said that in theory, the best switch is no switch. That being said, the switches coming out today are audiophile grade, and they're actually removing noise from the network. So there's a lot of advantages to having a switch. Even if you don't need multiple devices, you're just going to go in one side and out the other, and you enjoy the filtration. There's certainly a lot of benefits to a switch, an audiophile switch in a good 2-channel audio system. Steve, why don't you tell us a little about the QNet?
He did an outstanding job. I'm going to have to get a copy of that.
Oh dear.
Yeah, because that's better than I could have done. He knows a lot more about computers than I certainly do. So that was outstanding. In like really simplified terms, the way I kind of look at it, because I go way back and I'm old school. The old DBX input selectors, where you could connect 3 tape decks up together and put not an equalizer, but a signal processor, and move them from here to there and all that. It's giving you the ability, almost like an input selector to connect multiple devices on one unit. Right. But we do some things really unique. There are other audio manufacturers that are making switches, right, and they tend to buy, maybe not all, but almost all, are buying a kind of a rectangular device that they're buying from an OEM manufacturer that has all the Ethernet connections all in a row on one side, and they buy them OEM and they improve maybe the power supply, or maybe they improve the clock that's in it. We decided that we didn't want to do it that way. We went out and made the investment in a wave soldering machine and a component picker and all this stuff so that we can manufacture these from the ground up. This is a Nordost design. We made it circular because we have very high quality Ethernet cables and they have really big RJ45s on them. So you can do really, really high quality Ethernet cables and they're not going to get bunched up and too tight to each other as it is on a lot of the competitive models.
Correct.
So it's circular for that purpose. But also, I believe this has 5 independent power supplies in it. And they're all of our manufacturer, so they're very high quality. So it drops the noise floor dramatically in this product. And we are making it in-house. I believe Dennis was very instrumental in doing a lot of the bulk of the design work on this. This improves the sound of your digital audio when you put this in the system. That's the number one benefit is it's lower noise floor, so it makes digital sound even better.
It does. Let me take a look at that for a second, Steve. So if everybody can see here, I don't know if you can, but you've basically got inputs 1, 2, 3.
Bring it a little closer to you, Mike.
Sorry.
There you
inputs
go.
1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5. And 1, 2, and 3 are gigabit Ethernet 10100, 1000 connections. Okay, they're very high speed. There is a benefit. You can still, hear the sonic improvement using the high speed. That being said, the biggest sonic benefit is using the 10100 connections, not the 10100, 1000. So those have lower noise floor, lower speed. The higher speed connections can create more noise. The lower speed connections, the 10100, have lower noise floor, and you can really hear an even bigger improvement. So what does that mean practically? Practically means you want to connect your input, so you're coming out of your wall or out of your router or whatever it is, into number 1. That's the high speed, okay? It's going to get filtered. And then you want to feed your device, your render, your streamer, your Inuus, your Lumen, your whatever it is. You're going to want to feed that with 4 or 5. What will happen if you do an input into, say, number 4? So you're coming out of the wall and you're going into here, out of your router into here. And then you went out of 5 into the device, the render or whatever it is, and you're thinking, I've got double filtration. What you may run into is this: it's laggy because your input and your output are both 10100 and not 10100, 1000. That being said, we've tested it, and some devices work absolutely fine into 4 out of 5, or into 5 and out of 4. No problem at all. We've noticed that some work very, very well. But 90% of the time, you're going to want to have from your wall, your router, into number 1 or 2 or 3, and then out to 4 or 5. So why are there extra connections here? You may have, you're coming in here, this is your Apple TV, this is going to something that's not mission critical, and then your audio devices would be here. So that's the absolute best way that we've found, and we've experimented to the cows come home on this product, and we absolutely love it. I want Steve to talk a little bit about, it comes with the wall wart. So this is what the QNet comes with, and if you just bought this and you hooked it up, you would absolutely hear an improvement. That being said, our finding was, when, as I mentioned on the other podcast, when you go in with a linear power supply, in this case, Nordost makes a Q source, the improvement is 3, 4, 5-fold. It really elevates the performance to a whole new level. But I'll let Steve talk a little bit about that.
Virtually every one of my accounts that has bought this product for their store has then called and said, I want one for myself.
Yeah.
Because it really makes a big difference. It does come with the switching power supply, so that it's your initial investment is the unit and something to drive it with. But to really, as Mike said, to get the really biggest benefit out of it is going to be used the QNet. I'm sorry, not the QNet,
Q-source.
the Q source.
Yeah.
The Q source is a linear power supply, and it has 6 taps on it. They're all LEMO type connectors, which is a very, very high quality connector. The first 4 on there are just for a product we haven't talked about yet, but the Q Point, which is a resonance synchronizer, and I'll mention that in a minute. But it has 4 taps for that, which also comes with a wall wart. But we make dedicated wires to improve the sound. A linear power supply is much lower noise than a pulse or a switching power supply. I mean, dramatically. So, anyways, that being said, we do make wires LEMO to LEMO for this unit to plug it into the Q source. Now, on the back of the Q source, again, there's 4 that are dedicated just for the Q Point. And on this unit, there are also 2 more taps. And if you flip it over, you'll see that there's 2 selector switches. You can vary the voltage on those other 2 taps for ancillary devices like the Q net, like not the Q Point, the Q net, but also competitive phono preamp, but not competitive, but other manufacturers, phono preamplifiers, maybe their DACs, any number of units. Oh, the Rune nucleus
yeah,
will plug into that. So because those all come with wall warts as well, this will dramatically improve the sound quality of those devices.
And make sure that you read the manual and select the right voltage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the 2 taps, they don't all have the same voltages. I think we do on there, we do 9 volts and 12 volts and 19 volts and 24 volts.
Is there a 5 volt on there?
I think the 5 volt is for the Q points, and that can't be varied.
Got it.
And we orient these LEMO plugs so that you can't accidentally plug the wrong thing into the 4 taps that are made just for the Q point.
Yeah, there's a little red dot, I believe, on the LEMO connector. And you line it up,
it won't physically.
It won't physically pull out. No.
Yeah. I mean, if you force it in, you're going to break it.
Go into there.
Excellent.
And just so you know, if you buy a Q source, if you ever blow the fuse, the receptacle that the IEC power cord plugs into here in the power switch, next to it is the
fuse.
The fuse, and there's a second spare one in.
No, down below,
in there,
right down below. Yeah.
No, the fuse is. Oh, the fuse is there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I know because I blew a fuse.
and fortunately, there was a second one in there.
There's always
we know which ones they are now, but initially, those of us out in the field, we weren't exactly sure what it was, and then we.
Yeah, clumsy people knocking the power cable out caused a little short or whatever it was. I don't know. And it blew the fuse, and luckily I had another one. Otherwise, I was going to have to wait a while to listen to music again. But suffice it to say, it was good to have another one in there. Why don't you tell us about the Q Point? Now, this is a fascinating product.
This is a product that our owner. Joe, when this was first developed, was so excited about this, and they introduced it at the Munich show a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And when Joe came back, he said, you're just not going to believe this thing, what it does. He goes, it created so much excitement.
Buzz. There was so much buzz going on at Munich
amongst other manufacturers, as well as the consumers that were at and the retailers that were at the show. This unit is a resonance synchronizer. And you're going to say, what does that mean? And again, we work with resonance. We don't work against resonance. That's our philosophy, to get better sound. This unit has like a black acrylic end on it here, and it's machined aluminum. Mr. Hockey Player here, it looks like a big,
it does. Looks like a large hockey puck.
It does,
yeah.
And what this unit does is, and I'll talk about this in a minute, it also has the LEMO connector. So this is something that comes with a wall wart, but you also have the ability, 4 taps on that, you can use up to 4 of these. What you do with these units is you put them under a component, and you want to place them under the audio circuitry, not the power supply, but the audio circuitry. It emanates a field up about maybe to this height, 8 to 10 inches, somewhere in that area, up into the component that it's underneath. And it basically, it's again, it takes the resonances and synchronizes them. A really, really, really simple explanation I like to use is it's like having a mini conductor inside the gear. Your resistors, your capacitors, transistors, their tubes, they're all resonating differently, and they're creating noise, and they're fighting against each other the way that they're all resonating in this random pattern. This emits a field or a signal that makes them all resonate similarly together. It's like a little conductor in there saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, we're going to beat to the same beat. It's a fascinating device. It lowers the noise floor. It improves the sound. There is a switch on here, and there are 2 modes, and it changes the beat. And with some components, you're going to find, I think they said with analog, you like it in the blue mode, and in solid state maybe, and amplifiers, the green. And it's just a simple flip of the switch here. So you can very easily demonstrate it to yourself which one you think sounds the best.
And have you found putting it under what, a DAC, a preamp, a streamer?
Yeah. Digital, again, very generates a lot of noise, and this helps tame that. And also preamplifiers, sources like a CD player. You don't want to put it under the drawer where the the laser assembly is and all. You want to put it somewhere where the signal circuitry is. And you can usually go online to the manufacturer of your gear and look at an exploded picture of the circuitry and get an idea of where, you're going to know where a power supply is.
So if it's the back left corner, you're going to put more up to the top right.
Yep. Like now, some folks our sort cones work really well with this, because if you put this under a piece of gear, it's just added, it's, I don't know, I forget, it's over an inch. Yeah, about 1.25 inches or something like that. Some gear, there's not that much space. So if you put sort cones under there, it's going to fit. It's going to give you the space that you need. But let's say you can't put it on the bottom, or your unit has an incredibly robust bottom chassis on it. You can flip it over and put it on top of the gear, because this is where the signal comes out, so the black acrylic, and put it on top of the gear where that audio circuitry is. The only time you're not going to want to do that is if it's, let's say it's a piece of tube gear, and it's an area where it gets really hot. That's not a good idea. We also include, it's almost a little coaster, a leather-like coaster that you can put on top of the gear so that you don't have to worry about scratching.
Have you found it more effective under the gear or on top, or it just depends?
It depends on the gear itself. I mean, some gear has a thin top panel and a really thick one on the bottom, or they're both similar. And again, it's one of those where you can experiment. You're going to hear the difference.
Have you tried this under some of your tube equipment? I know you're a big tube fan. So.
I have. In my office system, I have a rebuilt Dielectric Stereo 70 that I actually have it, because you can see the circuit board. It's right where the 7199 tubes plug in, and I have it directly up underneath there.
Interesting.
And it does make a difference. I had another one that was also under the CD player, and one side sounded better than on the other side.
So you would, if the drawer is on the left of the CD player, it doesn't matter about the drawer. It just matters about the power supply, where you're going to put it.
You don't want to put it by the power supply.
Correct.
It's not going to affect the power supply.
Good.
It's going to affect the audio circuitry.
So as close to all of the audio circuitry as you can.
Yep.
Does it emanate, horizontally or just simply vertically?
Simply vertically.
So would somebody with a large, whatever piece, would they benefit from 2 maybe?
Yeah.
Under there? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. We initially say try one. You're going to hear a difference, and you're going to find that your primary source and your preamplifier. And again, because the preamplifier is handling all the signals from all your sources, so you want to do that, and you want to do your primary source. In anything digital, it does make a really big difference.
That's interesting.
In digital gear, because there's so much going on inside those units.
Very cool.
You want to really organize the resonances so they're not fighting against each other. And again, the goal is lowering the noise floor.
Right.
And that's what it's doing.
Very
and it's
cool.
They're not super expensive. They're affordable. And they work.
Thanks, Steve. And anything else you wanted to talk today to us about? Some of the products? Anything else you want to go through?
Our name is Nordost, and roughly translated, because a lot of people think that we are, because we have a big European presence, think that we're a European company. We make our products in Holliston, Massachusetts, which is one town over from Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is where the Boston Marathon starts. A once sleepy little town that I just happened to have lived in until I was 11 years old.
Well, there you go.
But Nordost is one town over from there. But we are very, very proud of the ability to make our own products, and we're proud of the quality of the products, and we get, it's always great to get really good reviews in the press, and we always do. But our retailers, I think, usually find us really easy to work with.
Very easy to work with, and the fit and finish of the product is second to none. The packaging, everything that is delivered to the customers, they're very satisfied.
Yeah, these folks, Mike Malley, did an outstanding unpackaging of
Unboxing
of was it
it was really good.
Odin 2 cables or something, I think, and our owner loved it so much he made everybody sit in the lunchroom that day and watch the YouTube video.
Now, what I recall from that is that you sent us, for Mike, for doing that, you sent us a Nordost shirt, but somehow it's ended up on Rick right now. Whenever the trinkets come in, Rick is the swag. Rick is the first guy to grab it.
I like it. Yeah,
he likes it.
Yeah, wear it proudly.
These are the nicest polo shirts that we've done before. We had another one, a grayish color one. I shouldn't say this, but I didn't like it. But this is a nice shirt. That's a very nice shirt.
That's a great shirt. I like it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Very, very good. Rick, did you have any questions for Steve?
He explains everything
He
so
does.
well.
He does.
I mean, I can tell you this is the first time you've done this. You've gone through this stuff
It's
many
hopefully
times.
ingrained in the brain.
Yeah, but I think the basic thing now, to me, how Nordost got established, how they made their name, was this wire concept.
The micro monofilament, and it's incredibly difficult to make that cable.
Yeah, I mean,
it's done on these incredible loom machines, and it's incredibly precise. One reason that the product is not cheap is that there's a lot of waste at times manufacturing this product, because it has to be perfect or we're not going to release it.
Yeah.
If we have a run that we're not happy with, we do it over again.
And to me, coming from the technical side of it, there's a thing called dielectric and dielectric absorption. And what that means is the dielectric is what separates, the different conductors in a cable. It can be in power cord, signal cord, loudspeaker cord. And that can actually, as a signal goes through it, it can absorb some of that signal and then re-radiate it back into the cable, the dielectric absorption. It's like a sponge, But when you separate the conductor, the wire, from the dielectric as much as possible, which is what you've done, you eliminate a lot or almost all of that dielectric absorption. So it's a much cleaner signal. You don't have that echo that comes after it. When
it's like a battery effect or something, or a capacitor effect. It delays the signal.
It charges up the dielectric and then it releases it in there. So this wire in here, I don't know if everybody can see it, but I mean, this micro monofilament is spacing that out, like Steve said. So there's just air. And the very best dielectric is vacuum. And the next best is air. So this is the next best thing. I mean, you can't build a vacuum cable. You can vacuum tubes, but not a vacuum cable. So because of that, and then this clear on here, isn't this in the Teflon family?
It is. It's a copolymer Teflon.
Yeah.
It melts at like 421 degrees instead of 500 something or whatever.
So Teflon is a great dielectric in itself. So when you combine the Teflon family with the air dielectric, I mean, you really can't do any better than that. So.
And I love it because anytime I, as a hobbyist, like to rebuild old tube gear, and I like using wires. If I'm replacing any wires internally, I like a Teflon jacket because I'm clumsy and I tend to hit the insulation with the soldering iron, and it'll usually melt, but not this stuff. The FEP or the Teflon tends not to melt.
No, and I can tell you there's some manufacturers that use all Teflon wire in there, silver-plated copper, Teflon-coated wire. And if there's a slip of the soldering iron or they hold it on there too long, it doesn't damage it. It's cosmetically the same.
Exactly.
Teflon has such a high melting point in it. So it gives a very clean appearance. And then you have the sonic effects of the Teflon. Teflon has a very clean, fast sound to it.
Yeah, we found it's better than PVC and any of these other.
Oh yeah.
The other materials that are, is it PE is another one, I think. They're good, but we have found this to be the best.
So I just want everybody to know that there's a lot of technology in there that would probably bore a lot of people to hear about that. But it's good to just hear some of it. That the dielectric effects, and then the parallel conductors, reduce the impedance, and then the capacitance by the spacing. So there's some real science in there. It isn't just voodoo, black magic, just some marketing thing. I mean, people that are watching this know that there's measure. You can put it on test equipment and measure it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a test done many years ago in Britain, and it was in, I don't know if it was in Hi-Fi News and Record Review or maybe Absolute Sound, where I forgot the name of the company, but you can look at it on our website, and they measured the differences in what some of the product did. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people say, well, you can't measure, so there's no difference. Well, maybe we're not measuring the right things.
And Steve, I know Nordost actually publishes, you have a lot of your data, so you have your inductance, you actually measure it, and for each cable, we can look at that as dealers and see the specs of each cable to find the right one for the customer. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. Anything else, Rick?
Yeah, just one other thing. I know that you have like a second generation of cables. Like Odin 2.
Odin 2, Valhalla 2.
Can you talk about the difference between the 1 and the 2 to people that might not be familiar with that?
Sure. I mean, we call Valhalla 2 our reference product, and we call Odin 2 our supreme reference product. It combines all the best technology that we do. We showed you the micro monofilament, the little barber pole effect here. In those cables, we use something called dual micro monofilament, and what we do is we take 2 threads and twist them together and then wrap them around the conductor. Mm-hmm. Well, when you do that, think about it. There's ridges on that. It's not one smooth surface. So there's even less contact because it's only touching the ridge of that wrap going around it. So it becomes a much higher, it's like what, 80, I think it's, I should know this, like 85% air dielectric, as opposed to I think, God, I'm going to get in trouble for this. I think it's 78%. I haven't talked about that in a while, I guess,
that's
with
okay.
the exact numbers.
Yeah,
but when you get to the reference and the supreme reference, it's even more of an air dielectric. We also use... there's another grade of the FEP that's very expensive that we use in that product. Not that this is obviously super high quality, but this is the top of the top of the heap in that product. But also it's bigger conductors. Like when you're in this series right here, when you're in the Norse 2 series. There are a number of conductors, and as you go from the Heimdall to the freight of the tier, you just get more and more of them. In its 22 gauge, I believe in the tier here, and when you get to the Valhalla 2, you're going to 20 gauge, so you're going to. Actually, when the number goes lower, it's a thicker diameter or gauge of cable, so you're getting even more AWG or gauge of the wire, and the same thing when you go to the Odin 2, and it's a slightly different design. The spacing of the conductors is optimized. I mean, you're really starting to jump up in the performance.
And for the non-technical person, how would you describe the sound difference between the 1 and the 2?
The philosophy that we work with in designing products is that as you step up in the line, you get more and more of the hallmarks of what we don't want to call it the Nordost sound because we don't believe it's a particular sound or coloration or anything like that. But the very wide dynamic range, the very linear response, how fast the cable is, the speed of the cable, it just gets better and better and better. Hi-Fi Plus magazine did a review several years ago. It's on our website, where a lot of the reviews are that you can download or read. And in the gentleman that did the review said that as you step up in the line, it just gets better and better. Again, the wide bandwidth, the very fast speed, and so forth. It just gets better and better and better.
More of
as
the
you
good
get
stuff.
Up. Yeah.
More of what is great about it.
It is. It's just you're just getting into the realm of can it get any better than that?
And back to the Florida Audio Expo. Last February, you provided cables for our big room down there. And everything was Nordost, and I think it was all Odin and Valhalla.
Odin 2,
it was.
And I mean, the sound was just, when you stack all those layers, from the source all the way to the speaker, and you get everything with that same quality. I mean, it's just there's no bottleneck.
Right.
Everything's wide open. You know, it's not like, well, this cable's limiting. I mean, all the cables were fantastic, and
Yeah,
the sound in that
thank you.
room was just amazing.
Yeah.
One thing that we like to do, we've done over the years when we do demos at shows sometimes, is maybe we brought the really good stuff out for Mike and these guys at the Florida Audio Expo.
Yes.
At some of the shows, maybe we're not. Maybe we're using Valhalla 2, which is obviously
Great.
really awesome cable.
Yeah.
Or maybe we're using Heimdall or Frey. It depends. And towards the end of some of the demos, we like to take a Valhalla 2 power cord or an Odin 2 power cord and say, we're going to make one last change, and we will plug it into the Cubase, into the wall, replace whatever cable was in there. Because, you know, we used to say years ago, okay, we're going to make one $6,000 change. We're going to put this Valhalla 2 power cord in here, and everybody's, it's the only cable that changed, and it's going to make a difference. And everybody would sit back and go, oh, geez, really?
I know.
Because it made it does make a difference. So
Yeah, there was, I think one of the ladies that works for you, she was giving a great demo at Expona this year. Amy?
Yep.
Yeah, Amy. She was giving a great demo at Expona, and everyone was sitting there. Everyone walked out just like, oh my God. Like, you know, because she started out at, you know, a certain level and then started moving up the line, and everybody could hear the differences, you know. So it was
we'll give you a free tweak today, and we used to do this at the Expona show. I did. Your distribution bar, like a QB8. Well, maybe you don't have one of these. Maybe you have you know, a plastic unit. Shouldn't mention other brand names.
Other brand names, yeah. No. Another one.
That was popular many years ago.
Right.
Anyhow, we would always have one of those there, and we say, you know what? Free tweak. You can improve the sound quality of your system if you raise your distribution bar off of the floor.
Yeah.
And even with something like that, we would do it with this, and you would hear the difference. We put sort cones underneath. And by the way, we now make an outrigger that you can buy.
It's like a frame that goes on these.
Yeah, and it comes out here, so you can put the sort cones on it to really stabilize this, and also get it up off the ground.
Yeah.
But we would do that with some of the competitive or just, you know, inexpensive power strips, and getting it up off of the floor and away from carpeting and so forth. You hear easily the difference that the improvement that brings.
Absolutely.
And you make cable lifters for this, for the flatline
Oh, we do.
cable.
Yes, we do. Sort
to get
lift.
it up off the floor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rick,
Great.
what's the difference? What would somebody hear if they had a heavy carpet floor versus a wood floor, you know, or ceramic tile? What would be the differences? I mean, if you've got carpet, you need to be paying more attention to getting the devices, the cables and whatnot off the floor.
Yeah, because it's back to that capacitive, the dielectric effect. You know, a carpet is made of polyester, rayon, nylon, something, you know. So by putting your cable on that to the whatever's underneath it, usually it's concrete or something, you're forming like a capacitor between the cable
and static
and the earth. Yeah. So that's not great. And then you go to wood floor. Well, wood's a decent insulator, you know, it doesn't conduct electricity. And then if you go to a ceramic, well, that's what they use on the power lines. You know, you see these ceramic insulators that the high voltage wires wrapped around. So that's even better. So I would say,
if you have carpet, you definitely want to pay attention to these
the
things.
carpet's going to be the worst.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the wood's going to be better, and then ceramic tile is going to be even better then. So, but, you know, Steve can, you know, I haven't tried it myself. I'm just saying the theory of it, you know. But Steve can tell us with the lifters where it's made the most improvement to our listeners and watchers, that saying, well, okay, I got a carpeted floor. What am I going to hear? And then,
I guess I don't have a sort lift with me today, but it uses a piece of micro monofilament that links it, that the cable, you know, our cables are, you know, this ribbon type construction, and we're very big on resonance, working with resonance in the cables. We don't want that to be disturbed by being put on a really hard surface or laying flat or whatever. These fit vertically down into the sort lift, but it's like a springy kind of effect. It's on a spring mechanism, so that this wire is suspended there that it lays up against. It doesn't disturb the resonance characteristics of the cable design. So you hear an improvement in sound. You know, we had a customer that had bought an awful lot of Nordost over the years, Brent, and he bought the Sorf lifts, and he goes, I really bought them from a cosmetic standpoint. I just wanted to lift the cables up, make them look nicer and neater. And he called me one afternoon. It was on a weekend, and Brett's like really respectful. I'm not calling people, and whatever. But he said, I really had to call you to tell you this. And I was thrilled to hear from him.
Yeah.
And he said, that made one of the biggest improvements on my system of anything that I've done so far with all the products, was getting it up off the floor and letting the resonances set in the little trough that's created by the sort lift and not disturbing the resonance characteristics or properties of the cable.
Steve, do you find that with the cable lifters, do you find that it's most beneficial in the speaker, the interconnect, the power, all three? What have you found?
Pretty much the speaker cables, because they tend to be, in a lot of instances, a longer cable.
Got it.
Than, most interconnects are going to be 2 meters.
2 meters, yeah.
In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing that we should talk about is we believe that a 2 meter, well, not believe, we know, a 2 meter speaker cable, a 2 meter power cord sounds better than a 1 meter, and that's due to resonance characteristics. It's the cables are slightly stiff, and it's AC current, alternating current. There's vibrations in there, and working again with resonances and tuned lengths. 2 meter sounds better than 1 meter. If you buy a 1 meter and a 2 meter, the 2 meter is going to sound better. Same with interconnects. A 2 meter is going to sound better.
Well, I was going to mention that to you. I actually tried a sample of a 1 meter and then switched to the 2 meter, and I couldn't believe the exact same cable with the exact, pretty close to the same amount of hours on it sounded that much better as a 2 meter. Even though the two components are sitting right next to each other, I still went with the 2 meter because it did sound better.
Yeah. If Mike tells you, you really, some people will say, okay, I have a rack with my gear in it. I only need a 1 meter power cord. Buy the 2 meter. It's gonna sound better. And the same with the interconnects. And we become somewhat obsessed sometimes that, well, I want it to be as short as possible. That's not necessarily a benefit. And the stuff's behind the gear anyways. You're probably not going to see it. If you dress it properly, you're not going to see it.
What about speaker cables?
We won't do under 2 meters. We don't like to do under 2 meters.
Okay, so the same principle applies.
Yep. We don't do tune lengths above 4 meters. And the reason is because the longer you get, you're adding a little bit of capacitance, inductance every time you add length. And beyond 4 meters, you've gone beyond the benefits of our resonance.
And we're talking about speaker cables here, not just not interconnects. So interconnects, you could go 5 meters, 6 meters if you had to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. But they're then cut to those exact lengths.
Right.
So a 2 meter is really 2 point. It might be, for one of them, it might be, 0.14. Right. It might be on another, with less conductors, it might be, 2.08 or, extra, that's all. It's proprietary information, and it's done through listening tests and also a huge mathematical formula, depending on the diameter of the cable, the length of the cable, how many conductors. It gets very complicated.
Very, very cool.
But it does make a big difference, and it's a big benefit.
Absolutely.
Length matters because there's another designer of another company who I won't mention, and he said to me, well, why do you think I picked this length? Because he makes all his cables a certain length. And he says, it's not by accident, And
it sounds the best.
He wouldn't, sounds the best. And there's a technical reason, which I'm not going to share, but it's not like folks, it's not like Nordost just came up with this as a sales point. This is something that's repeatable to other cable brands.
A VP a few years ago of another company, cable company, said, we love the fact that you guys talk about that. Right. Because they said so many of us are afraid to talk about it. Right. They said, but we find the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely true. Well, Steve, Rick, thank you very much for today. Guys, I learned a lot. Every time I talk to Steve, we learn something new, And
I learned more about the QNet from Mike today.
There you go. Well, we hope everybody enjoyed it. You can see that Nordost is clearly great cables, but more than great cables. They have a whole other product offering, a product suite, and check it out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to click the like button. And Steve, Rick, Mike, thank you very much for everything today. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, guys.